All right, hello everyone. Still have a couple minutes to go. Thanks for coming. Oh. Trika, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Beto. Can you hear me?
I can. This is good. We've just gone live on Facebook. And
people are really coming in a lot right now, so I'm constantly clicking admit, admit, admit.
Thank you for doing that, Trika.
Happy to help.
7 p.m. If you're just joining us, we have a 500 person capacity for Zoom. And so if you're unable to get in, you can view us live streaming on Facebook at our page, Tucson Herpetological Society's Facebook page. So maybe you can type that in to everyone, Trika, when you get
I will do. I'll put the link in. I'm just nonstop admitting people.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Just testing again, Trika. I just made it so that participants cannot unmute themselves.
Gotcha. I'm just now adding the oops, I don't know why there's such a long Herpetological Society gobbledygook there, but okay.
Got a lot of letters.
There we go.
Oh, hello, Maxine.
Hi, Robert.
And Steve.
And Steve. Can you see Steve?
I can.
If I get closer.
Okay.
He looks like he's hiding behind some vegetation. I can't tell.
Always. Never present yourself. Never fully answer any question either.
Well, you've just disproved my my notion that participants are unable to unmute themselves. Let's see.
I thought ours said mute.
Well, at first it was
it's okay.
Muted by host, but then it's we got the ability to unmute.
Well,
Everybody's so quiet.
Yes.
That's unusual for our meetings, pre-meeting.
and I see hair over here.
Yeah.
It's to avoid any potential clogs in the connection or the delay, the digital delay on these things can be problematic. So I'm saving everything for the end.
Oh, good. We'll tune in later.
Yeah. What time will that be?
Oh gosh.
Just kidding.
We've got a resident Gila monster who hangs around our house.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Today she got one of the eggs we give out, chicken eggs, trying to save the tortoise eggs. But he also dug up a tortoise nest and looked pretty fat by the time he finished.
Yeah, so it's not a scarecrow, it's a scare Gila or a scare monster.
No, I'm the scare monster.
Yeah.
He sees me, he's like, holy shit.
All right.
I have to move him sometimes with a broom.
I'm about to mute everyone, so I will leave you guys.
Good.
Testing Trika, I just unmuted you and I muted
Yes.
everyone else.
Saw that. Thank you. I have nothing to say at this point.
Me either. What am I doing here?
I know. It's all you, baby. We've got 66 participants at this time.
All right. Look out for Hamilton Morris. I've invited him to come.
Baby, there are 66 participants. I couldn't see every single name.
All right. Well, if you see him, let me know.
I will do. Hamilton. At least they put things in alphabetical order in the participants, right? They do. Do you want me to alert you if Hamilton shows up?
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be good.
Will do.
So we're at 7:05. I think I'll just start now. So welcome everybody. It's great to try this brand new thing, this brand new experiment with Tucson Herpetological Society. As you can see our website there on the screen and our mission statement, which is dedicated to the conservation, research, and education concerning the amphibians and reptiles, or herps, of Arizona and Mexico. I come to you from Chemamagduag, otherwise known as Tumamoc Hill, the A'atam word for horned lizard mountain. And indeed, we here in Tucson sit on ancestral A'atam and Pascua Yaqui homeland and their ancestors, and it is a privilege to do so. And from here, looking north from Horned Lizard Mountain, we can see Babadak Duag, or Toad Sitting Mountain. And we're gonna get to why it's called that later on. All right. Before we move on, it is with sad news that I let you all know that our dear friend Phil Rosen passed away. He battled cancer and he was a tremendous person, a tremendous naturalist, herpetologist, and he is greatly missed. We have big shoes to fill, no pun intended. And these are just some photographs of Phil at his best. We have set up a fund in his honor, and you can donate to the Herpetological Society in his name at the donate section of our website. And there's also a nice memorial page of him that you can read there as well. Actually, before we get to my talk, the next presentation is going to be on November 30th at 7 p.m. again. And it'll be our business meeting, and we will also have elections for our board. And if you're interested in being on our board, just contact us through our website, our contact page. And then our speaker will be Randy Babb, who is an expert naturalist and photographer, and he'll be talking about the unique amphibians and reptiles of South Africa. So it'll be a fun slideshow. All right, I think I covered my list of things to say.
How you will be taking questions, Beto?
Oh, yes. You just heard Trika Oshant, my dear friend and co-host tonight. If you have questions, you can digitally raise your hand or you can type in a question in the chat box. And you all are muted to avoid any interruptions or internet bandwidth problems, delays, and things like that. So thank you, Trika, very much. Trika is herself a wonderful naturalist and someone that I hope you have the honor of being in the field with. It's been really great to be your friend. Tonight's topic is about the Sonoran Desert Toad and a lot of the misconceptions and the facts surrounding this iconic creature. So here's our protagonist. This is the largest toad in the United States. It's this big green toad with very large conspicuous glands behind each eye. It was formerly known as Bufo alvarius, and recently the name has changed to Incilius alvarius. And it is found pretty much within the entire Sonoran Desert and surrounding regions. It's as Sonoran as a saguaro, as a Gila monster, as a tiger rattlesnake, which is also pretty much unique to the Sonoran Desert. I should say that I'm going to be doing a juggling act with terminology and some facts and things like that because we have a mixed audience. So if I go over your head, you can ask a question at the end, or if I say something that's too elementary, you can also let me know. All right, so here's the Sonoran Desert. I'm gonna use a laser pointer. And here you'll follow my laser to the core of the Sonoran Desert here. It also includes the Gulf of California, believe it or not, and most of the Baja Peninsula. And all these surrounding areas on the south are tropical. And this toad evolved from tropical ancestors in the dry tropical forest. The Sonoran Desert is basically a confluence of multiple different flavors of landscapes. The Great Plains, the Mojave Desert, the thorn scrub, the dry tropical forest, the Sierra Madre mountain chain up here or down here in the south, and then the southern end of the Rocky Mountains up here. So it's really a meeting point of so many different regions and is why we are so diverse. All right. This is the distribution of the toad, and you can see it pretty much mimics the Sonoran Desert. It was also known as the Colorado River toad. It was described in one of the surveys of the newly formed United States-Mexico boundary. What you're looking at is the type specimen. This is the singular specimen, which was illustrated formally for Western science to tell the world, the rest of the world, what this thing is. And it was collected at Fort Yuma on the Colorado River, which is why it got its original name. And this number down here is the official catalog number at the United States National Museum in Washington, D.C. So this one toad has been sacrificed for science, and it sits in a jar of formaldehyde. And if anybody needed to know exactly what a Sonoran Desert toad is, they would look up this specimen. We don't know a lot about the lives of these toads. There was an unpublished research project that put transmitters on toads and looked at their territories. And they had, I'm not sure, I can't remember how big the territories were, but like all animals, or most animals, toads have a very specific and intimate knowledge of their territories, their little area. And if they're located relocated outside that area, they're probably going to die. One neat thing that they discovered or learned about this toad during the study was that apart from like human debris and human settlement areas, they sheltered in kangaroo rat burrows. These kangaroo rat burrows are mazes under the ground, and a lot of creatures, including the Sonoran Desert Toad, seek shelter in there. This is a cute photograph of a toad in a kangaroo rat shelter or tunnel. My friend was trying to figure out where yellow mud turtles laid their eggs, and he followed a turtle into a kangaroo rat burrow, and you can see the egg in the background right here. And there was a toad guarding it, just like a bridge troll. Can you guys hear that? So this is what a male, a boy toad, Sonoran Desert Toad, sounds like when it's calling for a mate, which is pretty funny because you'd think that such a large, relatively majestic toad would sound a little bit different. So toads, depending on their species, have a distinct call to avoid hybridization in the dark. So they know who they're going towards. If you pick up a toad, or if a male accidentally grabs another male, they release a release call. And this is what that sounds like. Sounds like a chicken almost. So when toads embrace to reproduce, like you see here, it's called amplexus. And there are large aggregations of frogs in certain years. There used to be a lot more when we had more reliable monsoon season. And they could be deafening. You'd have to wear earplugs. So like I said, this toad, the whole group of toads in the Incilius genus are tropical. They are found mostly in Mexico, and the Sonoran Desert Toad is a unique desert representative of that tropical group of toads. And because they're tropical, I suspect this is why they need more permanent, deeper bodies of water. They have a longer metamorphosis period. Some desert amphibians can turn from an egg into a tadpole into an adult in as little as 8 days. Let's see here. Maybe I need to. There we go. So they lay thousands of eggs, over 3,000. And like I said, they take a longer time to metamorph. And ever since there's been electric lights in the desert, there have been toads eating the insects attracted to those lights. And we see accounts from 1910 and 1912. This specimen came hopping in at the door of a restaurant in Maricopa in Pinal County, Arizona. I guess maybe looking for a cheeseburger and a milkshake, perhaps. They're certainly big enough probably to eat that. And then in 1912, under an electric light in Holtsville, California. So these toads are large, and so that means they eat a wider range of things. And all frogs and toads will actually use their eyes to push food down their gullet. And if you go and look up videos of toads and frogs eating, you'll see that once that tongue brings something into their mouth, their eyes drop down into their socket and help push the food down its gullet. But of course, Sonoran Desert Toads eat things that are protected by stinging mechanisms or defensive secretions. One wonders how the toads are able to cope with prey endowed with such seemingly formidable protective devices. So centipedes, tarantulas, all these very formidable things they seem to be able to eat. But things do eat them. Here's a badger walking away with one in its mouth. I was told by a keeper at the Desert Museum, Zoological Institute here in Tucson, that sometimes the bears would ever so gingerly and delicately flip toads onto their back and eviscerate them with their claws and eat the insides, avoiding the toxic glands on the head of the toad. And raccoons did this as well. Recently, or in 2015, we published a note in which an indigo snake was swallowing a Sonoran Desert Toad. So there are some things that do eat adult toads. So all amphibians, and especially toads, have defensive skin secretions. These evolved from sodium and potassium ion exchange that regulates water balance in these amphibians. And one of the beneficial side effects of that special adaptation were toxins. And they're especially concentrated in these glands called parotoid glands. And the psychedelic bufotenin was first discovered in toads, in bufo toads. So it got the name bufotenin. Bufotenin is found in plants, other animals, even humans have it in their blood and urine, and people with schizophrenia or autism seem to have heightened levels of bufotenin in their bodies, interestingly enough. Among other things, the toads secrete cardiac glycosides. These are toxins that are found in oleander, and they have the ability to relax your heart muscles permanently. This is why you have to wash your pet's mouth out with water as soon as they get a hold of these things, because they can die from that. And there's a whole cocktail of other molecules, but the Sonoran Desert Toad is the only animal on Earth that we know of that produces 5-MeO-DMT. And it's still a big mystery why. And there might be some other psychedelic molecules playing with this, playing into this, but we don't know for sure. So here's a new word for you, perhaps for some of you, and that is entheogen. Entheogen is a substance which causes an altered state of mind and a profound spiritual experience. Enter the toad. In 1967, there was this very technical article that explicitly identifies these psychedelic molecules from the skin of Bufo alvarius or Incilius alvarius. And it was in the Journal of Biochemical Pharmacology. And you have to keep in mind that the internet didn't exist in 1967. And so if you wanted to know about this stuff, you either had to practice a very specific branch of science or you had to sleuth. And in 1984, this pamphlet appeared by someone named Albert Most. This turned out to be a pen name or a pseudonym, and it was a long time before we could figure out who Albert Most really was. Many people claim to be him, but very recently, Hamilton Morris, a psychedelic expert or chemist, I think he came pretty close, or actually found who that person was. Anyhow, this is a very eloquently written pamphlet that basically tells you how to harass a toad and to obtain the substance from its skin and hallucinate. And that was in 1984. They even had a church with official shirts. Psychedelic Toad, our original and most popular t-shirt, the Church of the Toad of Light. The official t-shirt sanctioned by the High Council, whoever that might have been. And so this became popular into the early 90s. And of course, media being the way it is, made this into an urban myth that mutated into the misconception that people lick toads to get high. And of course, that'll make you very sick and potentially hurt your heart. In 1992, some very famous authors kind of set the stage for the beginning of a modern myth. They described their experiences smoking the secretions of Bufo alvarius, and they postulated that indigenous people in Mesoamerica may have smoked toad secretions. They speculated. And there's tons of toad imagery in Mexico and Central America. As a matter of fact, the things that you see here in the bottom left are incense burners in the form of toads. So far, there's no evidence to suggest that indigenous people smoked the secretions of Bufo alvarius. And when you look at the toads that are found in these areas, the Sonoran Desert Toad isn't found there. It's restricted to the Sonoran Desert. What you do have is the marine toad, which is a much larger toad with much bigger parotid glands. You can see here with the laser pointer. And there are some things that you have to think about. Why wouldn't such a powerful hallucinogen survive into present day indigenous practice? It's a very powerful substance that the Spanish invaders would have noted within their relations to the rest of the world or to Spain. That doesn't seem to appear anywhere. There have been some bones, toad bones and bodies associated with shamanic burials, but those all key out to the bones of this unique toad, the marine toad. They weren't the bones of the Sonoran Desert Toad. There were extensive trade routes, and if the toad was traded or that substance was traded, there's no evidence for it. If someone really wanted to, they might be able to do some residue tracing in some of the ancient pots. We can do chemical analysis of pots like happened in New Mexico. There were ceramic vessels that contained traces of chocolate. There are, in fact, indigenous practices that utilize frog secretions for hunting magic. In South America, the waxy monkey tree frog is harassed, as you can see, and the skin secretions are applied and burned into the skin as a stimulant, traditionally utilized by hunters. And down in Chile, there are these vessels that seem to resemble the patterns on their native frog species. And perhaps those frogs were used in arrow poison concoctions, who knows? But you can see the resemblances are pretty darn close. The significance of the toad also is maybe hiding in plain sight, something that we all kind of take for granted. That is metamorphosis. To witness a frog egg hatch into a tadpole and turn into a small toad is remarkable. And there's a lot of magic and significance placed on that. They also come out during the rainy season when things are growing. So there's signs of fertility and stability. So this picture will show you why the Catalinas are called Toad Sitting Mountain. This is the west end of the Catalinas, the west side of Push Ridge. And you can see, try and draw it out for you all with a pen. Parotid gland, eye, snout, eyes, or an eye, and then another parotid gland. Maybe this is a parotid gland here. And then the little hip dimples, we'll call them. And then here might be a back leg and another back leg. And maybe a front arm here. There you have it. Isn't technology great? And this is from the Tucson Mountains. Here we go again. Parotid, eye, snout, another eye, parotid, leg, hind leg, maybe another hind leg here. Anyhow, there you are. Some people have thought that the whole range looks like a sleeping frog, and here could be a leg. Here could be the back, and then the little eye spot there, and then the snout. But that's this here. Let's see here. This is more plausible. This was I learned this from an A'atam gazetteer, an indigenous Tahana A'atam place names book. Anyhow, there's also apparently a formation that looks like a toad or a frog if you drive up Mount Lemmon Highway or the Catalina Mountain Highway. I have yet to do that. So there are all these reasons that toads and frogs share significance in indigenous cultures all over the world. But this notion that people have been smoking the secretions of Bufo alvarius for centuries is just not supported, but it has been fabricated to promote the exploitation of these toads and indigenous cultures. And certain individuals have co-opted songs and motifs in order to legitimize the act of smoking toad secretions, Sonoran Desert Toad secretions. Specifically with the Seris, this has been a big thing. And the Seris to this day have recently adopted toad medicine for their own purposes. But it was never a historical aspect of their culture. And these are just some excerpts from the literature that shows that. Boris Malkin noted that the toad, although unaggressive and considered as such, is feared a great deal as a repository of all sorts of toxic traits. They all agree on the following attributes of the amphibian: venom in body, toxic to touch, always fatal to eat to most animals and to all men. This was Boris Malkin's treatment of the Seri. This is what he wrote. And he uses the term venom. It's not a venom. It's a toxin or a poison. There's a funny saying that goes, if it bites you and you die, it's venomous. If you bite it and you die, it's poisonous. And then Richard Felger notes the word for frog or toad in the Konkak or Seri language is called otak, or some other word that I won't try and pronounce. But it basically means thing that sits in water. And as far as we can tell, for medicinal or psychedelic purposes, toads were inconsequential in Seri culture. But this fabricated myth has led to the severe exploitation of Sonoran Desert toads. You can see here buckets of toads, which are being harvested. And on the right-hand side, you can see what looks to be huge, huge quantities of toad secretions. And to call this medicine is wrong on many levels. If you do psychedelics to be a better person or to be a better earthling or help yourself, you have to really question the source of your medicine and whether it is medicine or not. And so this is really an animal welfare issue. And this is happening on a really big scale. I first learned about this in 2014 when the Yaqui or Yoeme people invited me and Jim Rorabaugh to figure out how to do something about what was going on and what is going on right now. One of the things that is making this so popular is not just that it's a powerful trip, but it has the potential to cure people from their addictions to methamphetamines and opiates and things like that. But it's very poorly studied. And in fact, people have died from doing this. And people really need to understand that this is a very precarious thing to do. There's a small subset of people who have died of various causes associated with smoking this substance. And so there's that. So in 2016, 17, I was approached by Hamilton Morris and the producers of his show, which is a show about the history of psychedelic substances. Hamilton is the son of a famous filmmaker, arguably one of the greatest filmmakers alive, Errol Morris. Hamilton, however, is a chemist, and he is fascinated by psychedelics. And he has a very vivid imagination. You couple that with growing up on a film set or with a filmmaker, you've got a very unique individual. And I decided to work with the television show or the internet show because I felt like we needed to give an accurate story about this toad, because by this point, smoking toad secretions is very popular, and the myth of indigenous use, psychedelic use, was very prevalent. And so I called on my friends in the Yaki tribe in Sonora, and we went back to visit them. On the left is Laura Ursura. She was a translator between me and Ofelia Perez, who's an elder who we interviewed about the Sonoran Desert Toad. And it was really wonderful. We learned a couple of things. The generic word for toad is bobok. But the Sonoran Desert Toad has a unique name, and that's Guarepa. And there are unique traits about this toad. One is that it's actually the first toad to appear, and it appears before monsoon season. And it plays into a very significant event in the life of the Yaqui people and the story of the Yaqui people. And that is that in the beginning, when everybody was were animals or spirit beings, they were dying of thirst and it hadn't rained. And they needed to implore the rain god to bring water to earth. And one by one, different birds volunteered to ask Yuku, the rain god, for water. And they would knock on his door and he would say, well, you guys haven't prayed for me very much. So why don't you go back down to earth? I'll bring the rain, but you have to tell everyone to pray for me. And so as each bird went down, people on earth, or the beings on earth, could see clouds forming and wind. And before the bird could reach earth, Yuku would smite them and kill them. And so they could never relay the message and rain would never fall. But Quarepa, Sonoran Desert Toad, said, bat, give me your wings for a second. Here, hold my beer. Watch this. And he borrowed bat's wings and he flew up. And on the way, he sowed a string of eggs and dropped corn along the earth. And he got to Yuku, and the same exchange played out, except this time, Quarepa hid, and Yuku came storming out. And by this point, Quarepa's kids had already turned into frogs, or toads, excuse me. And so Yuku would rush down to one of Quarepa's kids, thinking it was him, and they would hide. And eventually, Yuku made it down to earth. So Sonoran Desert Toad tricked rain into coming down to earth. And the path that rain took became the Rio Yaki. And the corn kernels that were sown along the way sprouted into corn plants and became the site of the ancestral Yaqui pueblos, or villages, of today. So this is reenacted during the dances and festivities that happen after the first anniversary of someone's death in the community. They're done to elicit rain to fall on San Isidro Day, Saint Isidore Day, to bring rain to the crops. But Ophelia also told us of something which we hadn't known about as well, and that is that if a toad was seen, it was highly respected. To disturb a toad was to bring drought or flooding. But if you saw a toad, and especially a Sonoran Desert Toad, it would be carefully picked up, and they would tie red ribbon on its limbs, which represents the flower world of the Yaqui. And they would put it on a little platform or a bier, and they would bring it around to the village, and the elders would ask the toad to bring rain. And this is called Konti Bobok. So, apart from this psychedelic demand, the toad faces all these other pre-existing threats that basically the entire Sonoran Desert faces. And that is climate change, human expansion, and the availability of water, long-term drought. And this is a photograph of Quito Baquito Springs, which is a perfect example, kind of a poster child for the threats that face the Sonoran Desert. It's a sacred site to people and wildlife. And this spring is being depleted very quickly because of the current wall, which is being erected on the US-Mexico border. prior to this wall, the pre-existing wall was a barrier to wildlife, including Sonoran Desert Toads. This one desiccated trying to get through the grating of the border wall. So if you care to do something, you can donate to Indivisible Tohono. They're on Instagram. This is an Indigenous issue as much as it is a wildlife issue. Indigenous people care for 80% of the world's biodiversity. If you want to help nature, you should help Indigenous people. And the Center for Biological Diversity is also doing a good job as well. So legally speaking, the Sonoran Desert Toad and the International Union for the Conservation of Nature is a species of least concern. And this is because most people don't know about what's happening, and they assume that there are just hundreds and millions of toads. And there probably are still right now. That by the time we realize it, it'll be too late. Toads are collected from roadsides or electric lights near buildings and towns. And so people collect them in large numbers, and they send them to other parts of the world or whatever. And then the surrounding toads fill in that vacuum. And this leads to a false notion of an unlimited supply. So these toads should be left alone. There are a lot of naive notions around captive breeding of these animals to supply the psychedelic market and reintroduce toads into the wild. And if you talk to most ecologists familiar with reintroduction programs, it is fraught with predictable and unpredictable problems and issues. And as we know with the COVID pandemic, anytime you have large quantities of animals in one place at a time, you create a vector or a laboratory for diseases, not just to amphibians, because there is a deadly amphibian disease called chytrid, but who knows what could spill over into the human realm or other animal and plant realm. So there are more unknowns than we should poke a stick at. The back of that toad pamphlet that I showed you earlier advertised a handbook that apparently taught you how to breed these things. I've never seen a copy of it though. So what you see here is one of a few Facebook groups of people who keep these toads in captivity. You can see this toad here does not look happy at all. And this toad on the right is in an aquarium in a pet shop in Florida, and they're selling it for $129.99. This is not the best thing for toads. Thing is, these toads can't be released into the wild because they might have diseases or they'll be completely lost. In 2018, the first Bufo alvarius conference was held. I had been listed as a speaker in the draft version of the site that had gone live, and I hadn't even known about it. But there's a huge following of people who smoke toad secretions, smoke toad poison. And the first conference advertised a sapo or toad and ayahuasca ceremony, which sounds completely risky and dangerous for your body. This paper came out which supported the findings that smoking 5-MeO-DMT from toads had a significant effect on people with mindfulness and satisfaction with life, psychopathological symptoms. This is a double-edged sword. 5-MeO-DMT is a powerful tool, and it has a lot of potential to help a lot of people, but we need to not source it from toads, and we need to move to a synthetic surrogate of toad. This is an organization, a psychedelic organization, which sought to study toad populations. Their report page is pretty much undiscernible. It was not a complete study in any sense of the word. And notice the same image, same type of image appears on a fair trade toad website, which is attempting to source toad poison from wild toads, which again is just inhumane and fraught with ethical issues. So there was a statement put out by the authors of that last study regarding the misinterpretation of that paper, so that people would leave toads alone. And they also published the ethical and ecological considerations of smoking toad secretions. So our takeaway from all of this is that these are unique, long-lived toads. They're the only animal that produces this molecule. We need to quickly monitor and enforce and enact stronger protections. Its ancient use is pretty much speculative and inconclusive at best. We definitely need more research, find alternatives. And the biggest question is, why does this one toad produce the substance? Is it their diet? I can't find anything which is terribly more different from other toads. Does it have to do with their long periods of dormancy? 5-MeO-DMT is a tryptamine. It's a family of molecules that regulates your sleep and dreaming. Is it their water balance? Is it the way they produce their toxins? Are there microbial interactions, bacterial interactions happening that are unique to this toad? Is it in the eggs? Is it in the tadpoles? Is it in the subadults? Is it specific to the parotid glands? Hamilton noted that that the old study looked at the entire skin of the toad. When he analyzed the parotid gland secretions, he noted an absence of bufotenin. So it was almost all 5-MeO-DMT and other types of secretions. He also thinks that there might be other molecules at play with 5-MeO-DMT, but those haven't been elucidated. So there just needs to be a lot of study in order to create a safe and effective surrogate to toad secretions. And ultimately, each experience you have even with the same substance is inherently unique and very difficult to qualify in science or in the written word. So thankfully, we devised a conservation campaign here in Tucson. Cream Design and Print was so gracious. They helped design this poster and print. You see the toad is emerging from a Grateful Dead skull. The sockets of the eyes are water holes. There's a saguaro in the teeth there. There's rain falling behind the toad. And the melting yin-yang symbol represents life in disorder. And the metamorphosis stage on the right represents life in order. And down below, we encourage people to find a non-toad source of substance, and that harassing these toads is harmful to them. Basically, respect and protect wildlife. Here's that design. To this day, the Herpetological Society, Tucson Herpetological Society, has received well over $1,000 from proceeds of this design. And so thank you to Cream. We really appreciate them. Multiple articles have come out since the campaign was published. And I'd like to thank you for listening and hopefully helping dispel this myth around the Sonoran Desert Toad. And I guess I will take some questions.
So Beta, we have several questions that came up during that I think I didn't interrupt you because it was clear that they would do fine right now. If you want to open the group chat, you can, and you can see a couple of those. Blanca Villalobos has a question for you. I can read it, and there's many more incoming, but
sure. I think let's just go through them together, and we can just alternate.
So do you want to start with Blanca's? That's a first clear question.
Yeah.
So she says, sana, sana, colita de rana. Si no sanas hoy, sanarás mañana. So do you have any knowledge of where this saying comes from in relationship to indigenous ways from so-called Mexico?
Yeah. That's a great observation. I'm just gonna guess right now that saying might have come from Europe, and the fact that Europeans and Asian peoples had been utilizing toads for medicine before the European contact in Mexico, and toads in Europe and Asia have also always been associated with medicine and doctors and witches and shamans in those parts of the world. But perhaps there's a connection there in the New World.
Sorry, I was distracted trying to find an answer for another question there. So another comment anyway, Gabriel Vega has a scientific paper in the chat, which I have copied and we can share with folks. Regarding a paper that proves that we already know that indigenous lands have greater or equal biodiversity compared to other protected lands. So we can share that chat.
Great.
And scrolling through other questions, if folks raise hands or send in questions in here. Here's a question. 5-MeO-DMT is still an illegal. This is from Ian. Hi, Ian. Oh, oops, this is supposed to be private. An illegal Schedule I substance. If people want it, how can people? Ooh, maybe this is why it's a private question.
So I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, you could.
I'll answer that.
Okay.
So if you have, if a law enforcement person determines that you are collecting toads with the intent for psychedelic purposes, you could be prosecuted on a federal crime because it's a scheduled narcotic. It's a scheduled substance. Yeah, I think that answers that.
Well, and then so the comment that you made about not sourcing it from toads, so how can it be accessed otherwise?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I'm sorry. So so if folks are being sensitive and not wanting to source it from toads, is it possible to source it otherwise?
Oh, so there are plant-based sources of 5-MeO-DMT, and they are practiced within indigenous churches, and that's ayahuasca.
Oh my, if you only knew. We will save the chat box, but there are several links on here, including links to the t-shirts that Beto saved. And I'm assuming, Beto, that that is also on the website.
Yes. Well, yes.
So Miles
Traphagen.
Thank you. Yeah, Miles. Sky Island Alliance, Cuenca Los Ojos, and Wildlands Network have active monitoring projects to document and quantify the effects of the border wall on wildlife. So you can connect with them if you have other observations on border wall impacts to wildlife.
Matt Nordgren, one of my best pals, asks, how can I become a member of the Tucson Herp Society? You just go to tucsonherpsociety.org. I'll bring up that slide. There.
And hopefully folks are taking note of that. And while you are, here's another question for you, Beto. Are you aware of any ceremonial practitioners who have made the switch to synthetic 5-MeO-DMT in a ceremonial context, or is it something yet to happen?
I hope it's happening. I'd like to think that it is happening, just for the sheer number of people on Earth. But I hope so. Gabriel asks, what impact does the bullfrog have on the Sonoran Desert Toad, and what measures, if any, are taken to eliminate the bullfrog? I don't think we'll ever eliminate the bullfrog. The bullfrog was introduced to the Southwest a long time ago, and it's basically eaten everything in its path. And because it's also a large green amphibian, the Yoeme or Yaqui word for bullfrog is also guarepa. But I don't know specifically what if the bullfrog is impacting the toad. I assume that it could be out competing it, but no one's looked into that.
Good question. Do you want to take Ryan Miller's question there?
Ryan Miller, do you have an opinion if 5-MeO from a non-toad source produces an equally profound psychedelic experience? We don't know, and that's a huge don't know, because like I said, every time you experience one of these substances is a very unique experience. And so let's just say that, for example, that you had 5-MeO-DMT produced in a laboratory and 5-MeO-DMT or just the skin secretions of the toad, which has a whole bunch of things. The idea is that when you smoke the toad secretions, all of those terrible things dissolve with the heat and you're left with 5-MeO-DMT. That's just a speculation. But because they're just such powerful substances, we can't really know what the unique qualities of toad-sourced substances and what synthetically produced 5-MeO-DMT are. It's like scientists who try and rate pain. My pain number 5 on the scale could be your number 1 or 2. So these are very difficult substances to study. And but we definitely need to begin to understand them more and create safe and ethical alternatives that help people for the things that they need help on. And there need to be appropriate and non-exploitive and non-appropriated ceremonies that need to happen around those substances, because we need to be respectful of people and animals. Let's see here.
You got a whole lot of wonderful talks, Beto.
Thank you.
A
Thank
lot
you
of
all.
thank you. A lot of gratitude.
5-MeO DMT toad venom healed my mental health better than any other treatment. Humans would benefit tremendously from prioritizing the protection of this toad and its habitat. You're absolutely right. And again, Indigenous people have songs and ceremonies associated with their medicines, and that is directly related to the well-being of the things that they use, whether it's a toad or a plant. And the Yaqui tribe is currently looking for ways in which they can restore their watershed and become food independent and water independent by harvesting rainwater, with the story of Bufo alvarius as the guide. So protecting the toad and becoming food independent and water independent at the same time, and allowing them to be the gatekeepers and the stewards, the custodians of the toad. Lagartica says, great presentation. Thank you. Thank you. 5-methoxy-DMT is a relatively simple molecule to synthesize. Should that fact be employed to relieve harvesting pressure? That's a very complicated question. If you commodify it too much, then you just force people to take it from toads for free. All right.
You'll see another comment from my dear friend Ian in Mexico.
Yes, you're welcome, Ian.
I'm sure everyone can see that.
This is Marina Luciani. I hope I pronounced that right. She's wondering if there are websites or online communities you would recommend for learning and sharing accurate info about this species. Well, you're at one right now. We're working on creating a website, a tricky website, something that someone who wanted to extract this from toads would go to, but would be actually met with factual information. Is there any way to responsibly extract the venom in your opinion? Well, that's from Aaron Holson Singh. Well, that's a big question, and you have to ask yourself if exploiting an animal is worth the experience that you want to have, and is it the right path to take for the place you want to go in your life. And if you're going to exploit an animal, then you have to really consider that. Sit with it. If you care about toads, then leave them alone. Wow, it's 8:07. That went by fast. Asking my opinion if there is any responsible way. Well, responsibility is completely subjective. Responsible to you, to the toad, to what? Yeah. Does responsibility encompass respecting wildlife? Then yes. And if that's it, then you will leave the toad alone and not extract from the toad. Oh, great. So this is from Willem de Roos. He is a primary linguist working on Apache language preservation. As you know, the Catalinas are right on the edge of Apache territory, so I will ask my Apache consultants if they have any Apache names for the Catalinas referring to toads. Great, that's wonderful. I just like to I'd be happy to know the name in the first place. All right. Oh, good night, Peter. Thanks. Do you have any questions, Trika?
A million, but I know where to find you, honey.
All right.
This has been great. And there are so many, it's probably hard to scroll through all of the questions.
I think we got through them all. I went to the very top.
Right. But there were a lot of comments of gratitude, and you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson. Thank everyone for coming.
I would say that we will pose any links and other information to share. Robert, I'll leave that, Beto, I'll leave that up to you to post on your website on the Tucson Herpetological Society. And so anything that was missed can be found there. Is that right? You have a place for that?
Yeah, you can message us at our Facebook page or through our website. Yeah, and I'll provide my email here in the chat.
So any last questions? You can raise your hand or put it in the chat box. We're probably winding down.
Oh, I need to send this to everyone. Let's see here.
Even if you don't, I've saved the chat. I like Willem's comment there. Good dog.
The name for the toad is pretty boring, basically meaning big frog. Cool. Willem, do send me the word for frog or big frog. That'd be great. All right, I am going to stop the share, and I'm going to end the meeting for everyone, unless there are any final objections. Thank you, Trika, for being my co-host. And thank you, everyone, for showing up and listening to something that I care about a lot. And thanks for supporting the Herpetological Society.